Hello, and welcome to this live presentation by Yunus Law, PC, and ICNA Center for Social Justice. I'm Afia Yunus, and I'm the owner of Yunus Law. We are an exclusively immigration law practice, and this is also being hosted by the Islamic Circle of North America's Center for Social Justice. You can also watch this live being fed on their webpage. There's a link here in the chat box for those of you who may not have Facebook who want to watch this on ICNA Centers for Social Justice's page. So we're here today to kind of do a follow-up of the live event that I had for Yunus Law shortly after the executive order was signed by President Trump on January 27th. So today I wanted to do something a little bit different. We wanted to discuss the changes that have happened since our last live event, given all of the different court orders and different directives by different government agencies. And also, we've gotten a lot of questions regarding travel. And so I wanted to go into what to expect if you are going to travel, since, as we know, some of the travel bans have been lifted for now, and also what are some tips that would help you when you arrive at the airport. So that's upon entry from travel abroad. So these are the three topics that I'm going to be discussing, and then hopefully towards the end of the hour, I will be addressing the questions that ICNA Center for Social Justice received from its followers. So we did receive questions there, and you can also submit questions live here on this feed, and those will be answered as well. So just to jump right in, to summarize the executive order for those of you who may not be familiar with it, on January 27th, about a little over a week now, President Trump signed an executive order, one of several, but the one that we will be discussing today is the most pertinent, and that's the one that's referred to as the Muslim ban. It's protecting individuals of the United States from foreign terrorist attacks. So what this executive order does, just to summarize, was suspend the Refugee Assistance Program for 120 days from the date of the order, banned Syrian refugees pretty much indefinitely until the president finds that it's within the national interest to allow Syrian refugees in. So that's provision 1, temporarily halting the Refugee Assistance Program for 4 months. The second provision is restricting the entry of Syrian refugees almost indefinitely. The third one, most important, that we're going to be discussing today is the ban on the immigrant and non-immigrant entry of nationals of 7 Muslim majority countries. Now these countries are Syria, Iraq, Iran, Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, and Libya. So if you are a national from one of these 7 countries, and whether you are arriving on an immigrant visa or any non-immigrant visa, you would not be allowed to enter. So these are the 3 main provisions of the executive order that most of you have been hearing about. And so the question now is, what is the status of this order? So as it stands right now, there were several court-ordered injunctions that were temporarily putting a stay on the implementation of the order. So what that means is, you may have heard of court orders we did have the first one out of New York. We had another one out of Massachusetts, out of Washington, D.C., out of California, and most importantly, out of the state of Washington. So I'll just go into the most important and the one that's a hot topic right now, which is a court order out of Washington. This is the state of Washington. There was a federal court judge there who basically put a complete stay on the executive order, and that's nationally. So as of the order from that judge out of Washington, immigration officials cannot implement the executive order signed by President Trump. So we're still in that state right now, and we are expecting for this to take some time to resolve. But as of right now, the filming of this live stream, the executive order is under a stay, so it cannot be implemented. As of yesterday, the government did file an appeal on that stay. So President Trump's administration filed basically a request to the higher court to overturn the lower court's stay. So they're basically saying, you know, we signed this the president signed this executive order. He feels it's in the national interest, and under national security grounds, we want to be able to implement this executive order. And so the arguments for that occurred yesterday. So that's where we are right now. We are waiting for a decision from the Ninth Circuit Appeals to decide whether they will keep the stay on the executive order, so keep the temporary restraining order on the order. I know there's a few orders here, so it might get confusing, but basically we're waiting to hear from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on whether they're going to allow immigration officers to ban these nationals or not. So that's what we're waiting on right now. But the status quo right now is immigration officials cannot enforce the executive order. And this can change at any moment. It can really change as soon as we get an order from the Court of Appeals. So that's why it's really important for us as a community to really stay informed and to, you know, be in contact with either an immigration attorney such as myself, or stay tuned with ICNA Center for Social Justice as they constantly update their page. And I also constantly update my Facebook page to keep everything up to date so that you can also know like when you can travel and when you cannot. So I also wanted to go into now that we know the state of the order, how is the order being implemented right now? So like I said, the executive order cannot be implemented right now, but there are certain issues that are happening at the airport, and I'm sure many of you have heard stories of individuals being, you know, detained for several hours, being questioned, you know, encountering, you know, a lot of issues at the airport when they're trying to enter. So what myself and ICNA Center for Social Justice had decided is to kind of go over some tips on what to expect when you travel, and also tips on how to deal with those expectations, how to deal with the immigration officers at the airport. So as I stated, just to lay the groundwork, they cannot implement the executive order right now as it stands because there's a temporary restraining order. In addition to that, USCIS and the Department of Homeland Security basically excluded green card holders completely from implementation of the executive order. So this is outside of the court order that we have. Even beyond that, immigration officers have said, Department of Homeland Security has reassured everyone that they will not be preventing the entry of green card holders, regardless of whether the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals lifts the stay. So hopefully, we hope that stays, in the sense that green card holders will be excluded from this Muslim ban. So what to expect at the border. Now, I wanted to go over first what are your rights at the border. You know, a lot of people are confused about, you know, if I'm a green card holder, what rights do I have? Do I have any rights? If I am an F1 visa holder, do I have any rights at the border? You know, most importantly, do I have the right to an attorney? Do I have the right to free speech? So if you've ever encountered any of these questions, this is your time to listen in. I'm going to be going over in detail what your rights are at the border. So generally speaking, lawful permanent residents are entitled to due process protections. And what that means is they cannot be unreasonably detained, and they cannot be confined or arrested, let's say put into jail or into removal proceedings without a hearing before an immigration judge. So those are two really important notes. Number three, a green card holder is under no legal obligation to abandon their permanent residency status. So I'll get into this more in detail later, but I just want to include that in the rights here. Green card holders, unfortunately, green card holders and non-immigrant visa holders generally do not have a right to counsel prior to clearing customs. Now, that's not to say if you are going to be subject to detention in a holding facility, you can't demand an attorney. You can. But if you're being questioned about the nature of your travel, if you're being questioned about, whether your permanent residence is in the United States or abroad, these are questions that they can go into, and they can go into without an attorney. Now, I also wanted to go into the U.S. citizen rights, but first I wanted to go into this abandonment of permanent residence. So this is something that was really important for me to advise green card holders who may be traveling. What's happening at the border is many CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection officers, are pressuring and coaxing green card holders into signing what's called an I-407, which is an abandonment of permanent residency. Now, what this is a form. It's basically, if you sign it as a green card holder, then you're voluntarily giving up your permanent resident status on your own, so voluntarily. Unfortunately, what's happening, what we're seeing is a lot of green card holders, unfortunately, mostly elderly green card holders who may be spending 4, 5, 6, 7 months abroad. This happens a lot with green card holders from, Pakistan or, other countries. I know it happens a lot with Pakistani folks who are elderly. They may have a green card and hold that green card and maintain it, but they go home to Pakistan and they spend a significant amount of time there and make sure they come back before a year is up. Now, Customs and Border Protection officers are kind of, manipulating them into saying, well, looks here like you don't live in America, you live in Pakistan. And, these situations can be very, very intimidating and very anxiety-ridden. And unfortunately, we've seen too often in the past week where individuals are signing these I-407s and being sent back. So if you take one thing away from this live stream, I would like you to take away, if you are a green card holder, do not sign anything at the airport. Do not sign anything that the CBP officers give you. You are under no legal obligation to sign the I-407 or really any document they give you. If you refuse to sign the I-407, they may move on, they may give you a hard time, but you should stand your ground. So that's one thing I really wanted to stress is the I-407. And unfortunately, this is happening more and more with our community, and so I just want to make sure I stress that enough. Please do not sign anything at the border. And when I say border, I mean the airport. Please do not sign anything at the airport. Now, I wanted to before I go into U.S. citizens, let's go into, we can go into U.S. citizens. So U.S. citizens, kind of the same thing as green card holders, except obviously you have a heightened level of protection as a U.S. citizen at the airport. A lot of U.S. citizens have reached out to me and said, well, I'm a U.S. citizen. Can they do this to me? Can they do that to me? And, that's what we're here for. That's what this live stream is for, is to really give you the information you need. Even if you are a U.S. citizen, what rights do you have at the airport? So as a U.S. citizen, you can be stopped, detained, and searched at the airport. You have a lowered expectation of privacy. And so, you can be questioned about your basic, same thing with the green card holders. You can be questioned about basic biographic data information. What's your name? How old are you? Why did you travel? And you guys may be familiar with this question. Did you travel for business? Did you travel for pleasure? How much money are you carrying? All of these questions are fair game. However, the second piece of information that we're getting out of the airports is that an increasing number of officers are asking questions about First Amendment protected speech. And now this is questions you do not have to answer. And this is across the board. So this is for green card holders. This is for U.S. citizens. Do not answer questions. You have no legal obligation to answer questions about First Amendment protected speech. Now, what's First Amendment protected speech? It's questions about your religious affiliation, questions about your involvement in social groups, questions about your religious practice, questions about your political affiliations and your political voice and alliances, what political party you're a part of. And unfortunately, what we're hearing a lot out of the airports is questions about, what masjid do you go to? Do you pray 5 times a day? Do you fast? Do you consider yourself Sunni or Shia? How do you feel about Shias? How do you feel about Sunnis? So these are all questions that unfortunately CBP officers are asking, but they are not allowed to ask. And you, as a U.S. citizen and green card holder, are not under any obligation to answer those questions. And I want to make that clear because unfortunately these situations, like I said, can become very, anxiety ridden, and they can become very stressful, and it can become difficult to stand your ground. But I just want to make clear that, these types of questions you don't have to answer, and you should not answer. More often than not, we as immigration attorneys and constitutional legal attorneys also see on the back end where individuals who were at the airport, their answers were misinterpreted, misrepresented. The individual, the person traveling may have been confused and answered in a different way. And so, this is where it's really important to heed the advice and not answer the question. A lot of times people come up to me and say, well, I don't have anything to hide. And that's understandable, but at the same time, I've seen too many times where people's words were mistaken or taken out of context. And, there can be some very serious consequences to this. And so I, as an attorney who's seen this go wrong, I strongly advise that you should only answer questions regarding your travel, regarding your basic biographic data, but do not answer questions about your religious practice and your affiliation with social groups and your political practice. So I hope that's clear. Now, a big question I get also is my stuff. Can CBP officers take my cell phone? Can they take my laptop? And so, unfortunately, they can seize your electronic devices. So they can take your laptop and take your cell phone. However, U.S. citizens are under no obligation to unlock the cell phone, to provide the password to anything. They can, or decrypt anything if anything's encrypted. So if an officer asks for the password on your phone, you kindly refuse. You are under no legal obligation to provide the password. But however, they do have a right to take it. Now, usually, and I've seen this many times, so hopefully they're still following this protocol. If they do take your laptop or your cell phone or any electronic device or really anything from you, they do have to provide you with a slip. that basically is kind of a receipt indicating that they took your item. This is also with respect to your passport. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of clients have their passport taken by CBP officers, and so if they're going to be taking your passport as well, they do have to give you some piece of paper that says who's taking it, how long they're going to be taking it, and just documenting the fact that they took your document or they took your electronic device. Now, so I hope that's clear about the electronic devices. This also leads me into making sure you get the name and badge number and agency that the officer works for. This is really important, especially for me as an attorney, to be able to follow up on your items if anything was taken. And even more importantly, if you were harassed or if you were questioned about constitutionally protected speech, then I know which officer was responsible. And that's really important for me and also for yourself to be able to later on maybe file a complaint. It's much more difficult if I don't have any information about the officer. Now, something that the ACLU legal director of Pennsylvania, she was also on a panel with me recently. She told me gave some really good advice. She said that what she recommends is saying, if you're with the officer, sometimes if you say, can I have your name and badge number, it can create a very combative environment. It can make the officer become annoyed, become angry, and make the situation worse. And of course, we're all trying to avoid that. We just want to get home. So one thing she suggested is say, do you mind if I take notes right now? And just very quietly write down the name, and the officer should have, a name tag on his suit. Write down the name and the badge number and the agency that the officer works for. And that's kind of just a tip and trick of being able to get the information from the officer without making them upset. Another tip is be nice. I know this is, this goes without saying, but unfortunately, too often I've seen clients become combative, become visibly annoyed and agitated. And unfortunately, I don't know if I said this, but there's really no limit on how long they can detain you. If they decide to keep you overnight, they do have to provide you with a place to sleep. They do have to feed you, but there's really no limit that we've been able to see. Luckily, usually clients are detained anywhere from 30 minutes to 8, 9, 10 hours. So during this time, you can imagine becoming very frustrated, but I plead with you to maintain your patience and composure. A lot of the time, you're in a room in these secondary inspections and you don't have any information. You can't make a phone call. Nobody else is in the room except the other individuals, maybe who are subject to secondary inspection. And the officer may come in every hour, every couple of hours, and it can become frustrating. So I just want to stress that if you are in this situation and you are traveling and you are subject to secondary inspection, to maintain your composure, to be patient, try to be as nice as possible. Usually the energy you give off to the officer is the energy you're going to receive. Finally, if you're a green card holder, there are a few, and you intend to travel, there are a few tips on documentation to carry with you. As a U.S. citizen, obviously you need to be carrying your U.S. passport. As a green card holder, what we're suggesting is, in addition to your green card, obviously, and your passport, we're suggesting carrying evidence of your residence in the United States. So a lot of these individuals who are getting stopped at the border are being questioned about whether they really live here. And this lays the groundwork for the officer to slip the individual the I-407 and say, well, you don't live in the U.S., so you need to sign this form. So in order to avoid that whole situation, I'm advising my clients, and you now as well, to green card holders should travel with evidence of their residency in the U.S. What does that mean? You should carry your driver's license, if you have a state ID, if you have a local library card, a local museum card, utility bill with your name on it and address, basically anything you could think of that would show that you live in the US. It could be tax returns, bank statements, car insurance, health insurance. If you carry proof of your residence in the US as a green card holder, the likelihood of you having issues with the officer significantly go down, because then the officer, really can't, manipulate you and argue, well, you don't live here when you have, all these documents to show them, then usually you're reducing your likelihood of going into secondary inspection. I also advise, if you're a green card holder, to carry a G28 form with you when you travel. And this is when you're coming back to the US. This is an attorney representation form. Again, I'll type it into the comment box. That's a G28 attorney representation form. This basically just lets the officer know that you, as a green card holder, or this applies to even non-immigrant visa holders, that you are represented by an attorney. At the very least, this just lets the CBP officer aware of the fact that you're represented, and he has to stay within his bounds. So this is kind of what to expect if you're planning on traveling. Just to summarize, the executive order is currently stayed, meaning it cannot be implemented right now. However, we're seeing countless U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, green card holders, and non-immigrant visa holders being subject to secondary inspection at the airport. And so that's kind of what I was just going through, is advice on what your rights are when you're subject to secondary inspection and when you're at the airport, as well as just general tips on what to expect and how to travel, and how to try to avoid a potentially risky situation or dangerous situation in risking your status at the airport. So I believe that's the end of my piece. Obviously, if you guys have any questions about travel, let me know. You can put them into the comment box on the right, or I can also, you could email us, you could contact ICNA CSJ, and I'll answer all of your questions. Before I go into the questions, I had one last note, and that was that the immigration attorney, the legal immigration community has also seen that CBP officers out of JFK tend to be nice to her and tend to not overly inspect and overly harass as much as airports such as Philadelphia and Atlanta. So what we're recommending is, if you can, and if you have to travel, obviously, if you can, to travel into JFK. The CBP officers there are much busier. They don't have the time or the resources to hold individuals who are otherwise, not a risk. So that's my last tip. So now, I summarized. I just kind of want to go right into questions. So I'm first going to start with the questions that it was perfect, it's 8:30. So we're right on time. So half an hour in, and we're going to start questions. So these are the questions that people already submitted to ICNA CSJ. So I'll start with those, and then we'll go into the ones that are on the side here. So first question that we received: what will be the possibility for immigration for new U.S. citizens who gained their citizenship in the last few months? Will they be impacted in any way if the ban is allowed to continue? Okay, so what it seems this question is asking is, what about the people who are newly U.S. citizens? Okay, so under immigration law, whether you are a naturalized U.S. citizen or a born U.S. citizen, you have the same rights. There's really no distinction between whether I was born here or whether I was born abroad and I became a U.S. citizen. Once you're a U.S. citizen and and you have been deemed a U.S. citizen, you are given all the rights and responsibilities of a U.S. citizen. So I guess to answer the question is anything and everything I said about U.S. citizens would apply just the same to those who newly become U.S. citizens. Second question, my friend's green card expired 2 years ago. It's not a provisional one. So what that means is it's a permanent green card. It's the 10-year green card, a lot of people call it. Is she still a legal resident, although she did not renew her green card? Also, can she apply for citizenship with an expired green card? So this just seems like a general immigration question. It's not really pertaining to the Muslim ban, but I'll answer it anyways. So the green card itself is a representation of your status. It is not your status. So if the face of your green card expires, you're still a lawful permanent resident. You just don't have proof that you're a lawful permanent resident, but you still hold your status as a green card, as a lawful permanent resident, even though it expires. You can still file a renewal application. That would be a Form I-90. That's the green card renewal application. So even though it's already expired, USCIS will still accept the renewal application. Can you apply for citizenship on an expired green card? Absolutely. I've done this several times. I recommend contacting an immigration attorney, and I can really tell you whether you should apply for the renewal or whether it's best to just go ahead and apply for naturalization. Third question. I have heard that green card holders are not affected by the executive order. Is this correct? And I did answer this question in the beginning of the session. This is correct in some sense. So the Department of Homeland Security did basically issue a waiver. A lot of people are calling it a waiver for green card holders. So that's green card holders even from the 7 affected countries. So they will be allowed to enter the United States. How does the executive order impact DACA? So for those of you who don't know, DACA is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program started by President Obama. It basically gave employment authorization to people who arrived in the U.S. as children, and they had to meet certain requirements. They had to go to school, no criminal record. So, a lot of people are asking what's the status now of DACA. Right now, there has been no change. However, there is a leaked executive order. So what that means is it's an executive order that's not yet signed. It's basically just a draft that was leaked by the White House that will end the DACA program. What the leaked executive order says is that if you're currently on DACA, you stay on DACA, but you cannot renew. And so, unfortunately, those individuals will likely fall out of status once their DACA expires. And new individuals can no longer apply for DACA. So, but just to clarify again, that's a draft executive order. It's not signed yet. So as of right now, DACA is still going. And USCIS also said that they are continuing to process DACA applications right now until they get any other information. Next question, I am a US citizen. Can I go to Pakistan to visit relatives? I have been suggested that I should wait a few months. Great question. I get this question 10 times a day. So U.S. citizens, right now I'm advising you will be allowed to enter, assuming, there's no criminal issues or anything, but U.S. citizens have a near absolute right to enter the United States. So I don't foresee you having an issue with entry. However, big however, you may be subject to secondary inspection when you come back. And what that means is, you'll have to go through extra questioning, extra scrutiny by the immigration officers at the airport. And this is basically going to go into what I went into in my piece, where you're going to be questioned possibly about your religious affiliation, possibly about, why you travel to Pakistan. So, and unfortunately, the secondary inspection at the airports happening right now is often very lengthy, specifically for Muslims who are traveling to Muslim majority countries, and it can be very stressful. So what I'm advising is, even if you're a U.S. citizen, if you are elderly, or if you have if you're averse to anxiety-ridden situations, and you don't think that you could handle being questioned by an immigration officer for hours at the airport, then perhaps reconsider traveling right now, and perhaps travel later. And I tell everybody, you have to do kind of your own cost-benefit analysis. You have to kind of figure out on your own, number one, why am I going? Do I have to go? Is my sister getting married? Or am I just going because, I want to shop? So you really have to think about why you're going. And number two, if your reason is strong enough, you have to be willing to say, okay, I'm okay with being subject to this questioning, possibly being subject to this questioning and this harassment at the border, because it is happening. It's happening, and it's happening in large numbers. So, if any U.S. citizen, and this goes for green card holders too, wants to travel, this is kind of what I tell all of them, is you have to balance, why you're traveling, and then against, the possibility of being questioned and being detained at the airport for a long period of time when you come back. And you have to decide for yourself, is it worth it? Now, I went over a lot of tips on if you do decide to go ahead and travel, what you can expect. And, big thing is obviously know your rights. Like I said, I just want to reiterate, you don't have to answer any questions about your religious practice or your religious affiliation. Those are the really big ones we're hearing out of airports right now, is a lot of officers are asking about what masjid you go to, do you fast, do you pray, what do you pray, how do you pray, when do you pray? And these are questions you don't have to answer. So ultimately, just you have to make that decision on your own if it's worth traveling. Next question, the refugees that are already in the U.S., especially from the 7 countries, what would be their status? So the refugees that have already entered the U.S., they are not affected by this particular executive order. So this particular executive order only bans the continued entry. So it only bans any future refugees from entering the U.S. But those who have already entered here, their applications for their green cards, which they file afterwards, should be processed as usual. The next question, my cousin has a visit visa from Pakistan for 5 years. Can he come? Rather, should he come or should he wait? So as of right now, we know that Pakistan is not one of the banned countries. We also know that even if it was one of the banned countries, as of right now, the executive order is on hold. So my advice right now would again be, why is he coming? Does he need to come? If he's just coming to visit, then I would advise against it. This is simply because he's a non-immigrant visa holder. And what a non-immigrant visa is basically any visa issued for the temporary travel to the U.S. So that's a student visa, that's a work visa, that's a visit visa. Any of these types of visas are considered a non-immigrant visa. And, especially a visitor visa from Pakistan, unless there's some reason he needs to be here, I don't suggest traveling right now. Unfortunately, the airports are becoming increasingly difficult for Muslims right now. So unless he really needs to come and there's some pressing reason, I would advise against it. Next question, if someone has immigration issues, what is the best way to seek legal help and advice? Well, that would be me. I would say contact an immigration attorney. I tell this to everybody. If your car breaks down, you don't go to an accountant. If you need to file your taxes, which most people do right now, you don't go to a doctor. And if you have health issues, you don't go to a lawyer. But if you have immigration issues, you contact an immigration attorney. This is what we do. This is what I do on a daily basis. So I would advise, if you need legal help or legal advice, to contact an immigration attorney. Next question, are there any pro bono immigration lawyer help from any organization? If so, how and where? Absolutely. So I will actually, I'm going to remind myself to, and also for ICNA CSJ, to post some links to pro bono attorneys. So all of you viewers can have those links. There are tons of attorneys. The ACLU, to mention one, HIAS Pennsylvania, CARE, that's the Council on American Islamic Relations. Tons of organizations right now are providing pro bono attorneys. So, you know, I put down a note. We'll put a link up on ICNA CSJ's website and Facebook page, as well as my own Yunus Law's Facebook page. And next question, what is the next step for the executive order currently halted? So I answered this at the beginning of the live stream. For those of you who weren't here, I'll quickly answer the question. Right now, the executive order is on hold. It cannot be implemented because a judge out of Washington issued a temporary restraining order. You may see TRO somewhere. It's the same thing. So basically, the executive order right now is on hold. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the court above the district court, is currently deciding on whether they will lift that TRO or whether they will continue to allow it to stay. So we'll find out, you know, in the next coming days. We are told to expect a decision within the next week. So hopefully we'll find out what's the status, and be assured whichever party loses will likely appeal to the Supreme Court. So this is a long journey. This is going to be fluid, and I tell this to everybody. This whole situation is constantly changing, and so it's very important, number one, to, you know, contact an immigration attorney if you plan to travel, if you have any status issues, and you know, number two, you can stay on, follow Yunus Law PC on Facebook and ICNA CSJ, and, you know, we have constant updates. Okay, I apologize. I think my connection went bad. So next question, can CBP separate U.S. citizens from U.S. citizen children for secondary inspection? What is the situation for Pakistani lawful permanent residents? So in secondary inspection, your minor children are to be kept with you. So if you have children under the age of 18, they are kept with you in the holding room. So when people say secondary inspection, that basically means when you get off the plane and you go up to the officer behind the glass wall, you present him with your passport. He asks you a couple of questions, and you're usually on your merry way. But what's happening now is he keeps your passport and he says, follow me. And you go to a second room, hence the term secondary inspection. It's usually, you know, 4 walls, plenty of chairs, and I'm told plenty of Muslims. And, you know, you kind of wait in the room until an officer comes to you and either questions you or lets you go. So you can keep your minor children with you. You should not be separated from them. What is the situation for Pakistani lawful permanent residents? I went over this already, so I'll skip that question. So well, finally, I wanted to just address if I do have questions in the live stream. So we have a question here. As a green card holder of Pakistan, can I travel to Pakistan safely and come back in a couple of months? So same thing with all green card holders. If you are a national of a Muslim majority country, you can expect to be questioned upon your re-entry to the US. So this, you know, Pakistan, is not one of the banned countries, and even if it were, green card holders are being excluded from the ban. So you should be fine to enter. However, you can be expected, and you should be expecting to be subject to secondary inspection. And this goes back to my advice about weighing whether it's worth it to go and whether you have to go. You know, for example, I had a client who, you know, his family was in Syria. And so he said, you know, he was a green card holder, and he said, well, you know, even though I may be prevented from coming back, I can't leave my family for this long, and I can't leave them alone. So he was willing to take the risk. So it's really, like I said, it's a decision you have to make, but you have to be prepared to be subject to secondary inspection. And also, you know, go back to the beginning of this session and listen to all the documentation I said you should carry as a green card holder when you travel. What about if they tell us they have a lawyer to talk to us right there and then? Oh, well, their lawyer is not your lawyer. So any attorney that they give you is likely going to be an attorney for the government. I've never had a client actually tell me this, so I'm not sure if this actually occurs in practice. But if it does, definitely ask the attorney, you know, who they work for. And it's likely they work for CBP or ICE, which is the enforcement arm of the Department of Homeland Security. So this is where it's really important to have an attorney's card. And it's also really important, I don't think I mentioned this in the beginning either, to make sure that you give your itinerary to not only a family member, but also, if you're going to be traveling in the next few weeks or months, to an attorney. So I've had individuals reach out to me and give me their itinerary. I know the family member who's going to be waiting for them at the airport. If, for example, they don't come through and it's been 2 or 3 hours since their plane arrived, then we kind of put into motion reaching that individual to figure out, you know, what's going on, where are they. So it's really important to have your itinerary sent to loved ones and to an attorney, and also to have an attorney's business card with you. So yeah, I just, you know, an individual is reiterating, and I also want to reiterate, not only are you under no legal obligation to answer questions by the officer that have to do with your religious practice and religious affiliation, but you should not answer. And I think I went over this as well. You know, even though you may feel that it's harmless to answer a question, I can assure you, as an attorney, I've seen this go wrong so many different ways, and it's always, always, always better and safer to not answer. So please do not answer any questions again about you know, your religious or social groups or religious groups or religious affiliation or political affiliation. Okay. So how are we supposed to respond if we are asked these questions? This is a great question. So I also got this from a friend. He said, simply state, my lawyer advised that I shouldn't answer those questions, or my lawyer advised against it, or, because sometimes if you say, I don't have to answer that with a stern face, you might get an officer who's going to become combative, you know? And so it's about being nice, but being firm. So some of my clients, they said that they were able to get out of it by saying, well, my attorney told me not to answer questions like that. My attorney said I don't have to answer questions like that. My attorney advised against answering questions like that. And then you kind of just put the blame on me. And if the officer says, well, no, I think you should answer, we'll say, but my attorney said not to answer. And so, you know, try to make, like I said, you know, try to maintain respect and a level of composure, but stand firm on your rights. Next question. My father has a green card. He got ticket for Umrah, can't speak English. What should I do? Cancel it, or should he go? Okay. This brings me to a great point. The likelihood of travelers being stopped and subject to secondary inspection goes up significantly if you have an accent. So unfortunately, if you don't speak perfect English, that needs to be something you consider when you're deciding whether to travel. Because if you have an accent, or if you travel a lot, meaning you spend several months outside of the US at a time, or you travel to a Muslim majority country, or you're a national of Muslim majority country, you can expect to be subject to secondary inspection. So you're saying your father doesn't speak English, and he's also a green card holder. Really, again, this goes back to weighing the different factors. So the fact that he doesn't speak English is weighing against him. You didn't tell me where he's from, but I'm assuming he's from a Muslim majority country. If he has to go to Umrah, what we advise is take a U.S. citizen relative with you. So a lot of elderly green card holders want to go for Umrah right now. It's Umrah season. And also we're thinking ahead to Hajj. What we're advising is to, if you do have to travel, you've already made the plans, and we know that it's difficult to get the Umrah visa and to put everything into motion, have a U.S. citizen relative travel with you. Especially if you're elderly, it's what it can do is, you have somebody who speaks good English, who's a U.S. citizen, who can speak on your behalf to some extent, can explain things to you. And also, if you don't speak English, you can demand an interpreter. So if you're being subject to secondary inspection and you have trouble understanding English, you immediately request an interpreter. And the CBP officer does have to provide you with an interpreter. This is really important, especially for individuals who have a little bit of English, but they can speak it, but just a little bit. They're really taken advantage of. CBP officers will take advantage of that limited English and confuse you and get you to answer questions you don't understand. So I advise, if you are not 100% comfortable with your English, you request an interpreter. You have a legal right to one, and okay, I apologize for that. I think I'm going to turn the Wi-Fi off on my phone. So, okay, next question. Under what law do they can size your phones? Do they not need to have a search permission? Okay, so he's asking under what law can immigration officers seize your property. So under the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, law enforcement cannot conduct unreasonable searches or seizures, and that's why they usually need a warrant. However, at the airport, the courts have decided that the searches there are reasonable. The seizures of your electronic devices is deemed reasonable. So they don't need a warrant. They can take your property. But like I said, big reminder, you don't have to unlock it. You don't have to provide the password. And the ACLU actually has, I'll try to find the link and post it on my Facebook page as well as on ICNA CSJ. The ACLU has a phenomenal article. It's just like a flyer on how you can protect your data prior to travel. They give you different tips. One of them is to remove the hard drive from your laptop and pack it in your suitcase. Another one is to basically save everything from your laptop onto an external hard drive and sweep your laptop. Another one is to put your Facebook, all of your social media, deactivate it prior to traveling back to the US. And don't worry, everything stays. When you come back and you get your phone back, you can always reactivate and everything's still there. So I'll post a link to that on my Facebook page, as well as have ICNA CSJ post a link to that. If you are planning to travel and you want to protect your data, it has some really good tips on it. Okay, so one question is, can you please share some insights for H-1B holders? So I don't really know what you mean by share some insights. As of right now, H-1B holders, outside of the 7 affected countries, you're fine. I mean, there's no, USCIS has issued a directive to all of its field officers to continue to process H-1B applications through the H-1B season. So as of right now, H-1B season 2017 should be going as normal. So we'll see. But right now, it should be fine. I've already started H-1B applications for my clients. So next question, is the application for naturalization for the green card affected? Initially, there was some confusion on this, but as of right now, again, the USCIS has issued a directive making very clear that they will continue to process naturalization applications as usual. So my advice to many individuals, obviously this is a case-by-case analysis, but the general advice is to, if you are eligible for naturalization, to apply. We don't know what the situation will be 2, 3, 4, 6 months, 2 years from now. So it's very important that right now, if you are eligible to naturalize, to get your application in, especially if you are not from the 7 affected countries. We don't want to see a situation where more countries are added or naturalization applications are affected. As of right now, they're not. Naturalization usually takes, about 5 months. And so I would advise going ahead and filing. I'm just going to take maybe a few more questions. We did want to end on the hour. So next question, if someone applies for his daughter for a green card, she's over age. I don't really know what this question is asking. So I'm going to have to. So Aisha, but I don't really understand your question. If you don't mind rephrasing, and I'll try to answer it. Next question, how is dual citizenship impacted? This is a great question. There was also a lot of confusion about this in the beginning, but thankfully right now CBP is saying, just to be clear, right now the executive order cannot be put into action. But even if it were, CBP has stated that they will admit individuals based on the passport that they present. So if you have a passport from Canada and you have a passport from Iraq, then make sure you present your passport to Canada and you will be admitted based on your passport from Canada. And this is even if you're a dual national from one of the 7 countries. Can you touch on U.S. citizens planning for Hajj? So, it's the same thing whether you're planning to go to Hajj or planning to go to any Muslim majority country. U.S. citizens, number one, be aware of your rights, which I went over at the beginning of this session. Make sure someone in your family has your itinerary upon arrival. Usually for Hajj they do. If you feel you want to, you can retain an attorney to be present, but that's probably a bit too much. But definitely let a family member know that you're arriving, know your rights, and go into, if you want, protecting your data before re-entering, because you might as well be prepared for being subject to secondary inspection when you come back from Hajj. If a person has DACA and gets married to a U.S. citizen, can he or she apply for a permanent residence? Yes. So this is for Asma Nahid. Yes, if you are currently under DACA status, and you marry a U.S. citizen, you can apply for permanent resident status. For the process, please send me an email and we can go over that. How long can a security check take on a naturalization applicant? So this is a good question, because a lot of my naturalization applicants are being held on what's called like an FBI security check. What that means is your application is basically on hold indefinitely. How long? They can hold it indefinitely. Thankfully, we do have the courts, so we do have a relief available called filing a writ of mandamus. That's basically when you ask the court to demand USCIS to issue a decision on your case. You know, if an application has been pending for years, that's when we usually file these writs of mandamus. You know, if that's something that you feel would apply to you, you can reach out to me. How about a green card holder? Can they travel and then come back to America from Yemen? As a green card holder, we don't advise traveling to one of the 7 affected countries, but you should be allowed to re-enter. As of right now, like I said, green card holders are being are waived from the executive order, and on top of that, the executive order is not being implemented right now. But that's not to say you won't be subject to intense scrutiny at the airport. So, you know, weigh in your head whether it's worth it. If you are a green card holder, do you have to provide your cell phone and laptop passwords in secondary inspection and answer religious and political questions? So I hope I made this clear. I answered this question several times. You do not have to provide your cell phone password or your laptop password. You do not have to unlock anything. And you do not have to answer religious or political questions. Not only do you not have to, you should not. Like I had said before, you are under no legal obligation to answer those questions, and you should never answer those questions. We've seen too many times where individuals answered them thinking there was nothing wrong, and then, you know, it did go, something went wrong. So, what should you do if they want you to give them your password? Like I said, I mean, a way to answer this is to say, you know, my lawyer advised that not to give my password, or, you know, eventually if you get to a point when they keep pressing, then you might have to say, you know, legally I don't have to give you my password. There has to be a way that you say it firmly but nicely. So definitely keep your tone down, keep your volume down, and try to be nice about it as much as possible. But that's not to say get run over. I mean, you want to make sure you're asserting your rights. I applied for my naturalization now, and then I'm leaving for Pakistan. So basically, you're a green card holder, you've applied for naturalization. Unless you really have to go to Pakistan, I mean, I would advise waiting until you get your certificate of naturalization. Okay, there's just some talk about the cell phone situation. So I think I answered that several times, so I'll let that go. If I'm a U.S. citizen, do I have to worry? I mean, you will be allowed to enter the U.S., but you may be subject to secondary inspection. So be prepared for that. So I think I answered most of these questions. I'm going to end, so I'm going to end here. I just want to, you know, kind of just round out and summarize, and then end the session. You know, if you are planning to travel, you know, I get a lot of questions, U.S. citizens or green card holders. Like I said, for U.S. citizens and green card holders, right now you should be allowed to enter, especially U.S. citizens, but even green card holders are not being turned away anymore. However, they are being subject to secondary inspection, and I went over that in detail in this video. So what I say to everybody is kind of balance whether, you know, why you're going and whether you have to go versus the possibility of being subjected to the secondary inspection. And it's really something you have to do on an individual basis, is kind of analyze if it's worth it for you to go. Generally speaking, you know, we don't advise travel if, you know, as an immigration attorney, my obligation is to protect your status, you know, and if it's not absolutely necessary for you to travel right now, maybe maybe think about it twice, because I wouldn't want you to be in a situation where you know, accidentally sign the I-407 and you abandon your green card, or you're subject to detention for hours upon hours upon hours, and those situations can be very stressful. So you know, just think about it and weigh your options. So just to round out, again, I am the owner of Yunus Law. My name is Afia Yunus, and I practice exclusively immigration law. If you have any questions, you can message me on Facebook, or you can email me at afia@yunuslaw.com, or you can visit my website, which is www.yunuslaw.com. I thank each and every one of you for being here, and I ask that you spread the word of this live stream as well as my first live stream. And this is in conjunction, like I said at the beginning, with ICNA Center for Social Justice. They do a lot of great work, and I highly recommend you visit their website, visit their Facebook page, and support them. You can donate to ICNA through their website, as well as through ICNA National's website, ICNA.org, and also go to their Facebook page. So hopefully, as things change, we'll continue to have more live streams and keep you up to date. Please spread the word of this one so that we as a community can stay informed of our rights, and that really empowers us, is knowing our rights and knowing when those rights are being violated. It's really, really, really important right now. So take care.